Messi. Messi. Oh my goodness. Balotelli. Aguero. Oh, that is extraordinary. What a head, son. What a head.
Back of the net.
Hello, and welcome to the Not a Pundit podcast. It's Killian, Nate, and Connor, as usual, but for the first time ever, we're going to have a pundit. This man is a well-known face and voice on RTE, but also for his League of Ireland and English career. It is the one and only, the legendary, a friend of the podcast and of ourselves, Alan Cawley. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
That's quite the intro, Killian. I'm not sure if I can live up to all that, to be honest. But it's good to see you all. It's been a while, and it's good to see you.
Absolutely, it's great to have you here. The reason why we've called in the big dog, Connor, is Ireland. There's a feel-good factor around. We have a new manager. We have some great young prospects coming through. The League of Ireland is doing better than ever. We're pretty much at one of our lowest world rankings yet. There's question marks over the structure of the management team. What can we do to make this better? Really,
I do think it's probably the most Irish thing in the world, though, that our domestic league couldn't be doing any better, and our international team are having a mare. But I think I'll hand it over straight away to our pundit to give us the lay of the land of it, at least from your perspective of, I suppose, internationally. What with Heimir coming in, what was your feelings on it?
Yeah, of course, it was a left field appointment, lads. One that nobody kind of foreseen. We were all I thought we had kind of got to the stage where I felt John O'Shea was probably going to get the job, and I was fine with that. Stellar career that he's had, well respected in the game. I thought in a couple of friendlies that he stepped in as the interim, did quite well, and I thought that's kind of where we were headed. Certainly in terms of the coaches he had brought in as well, Glenn Whelan and Paddy McCarthy, and you're kind of thinking we can get behind this, and something to build on going forward. When he was asked the second time to do the interim, I don't think he should have did it at that stage, because he was being lined up to take over. Why they wanted him, now I know in terms of they wanted him to step in just because they weren't sure of a full-on appointment, but I think if they were serious about him ever being a proper candidate, he shouldn't have been asked the second time, and I think John should have told him, look, I'm either going to be the manager or I'm not. But anyway, look, he stepped in, did his 4 games. I almost thought it was an insult to him, but I was at the stage then where I'd be quite happy to give it to John, and I thought he was probably the leading light, if you like, because I never felt we were going to get Lee Carsley. Never.
Yeah, I think that was always a bit of a pie in the sky. But even with that, I think the comms around it were surprising, because, like, don't get me wrong, you can say what you want about his time as caretaker of the England national team, but his under-21 career is stellar. But I think all of us in the pod were a bit kind of going, we're probably aiming too high with that one. And I think you're right with the John O'Shea thing. I think he was. My only rationale as to why he stayed in there the second time was trying to shop himself for a job in the UK or even further afield. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. And I think it's just because it literally boiled down to Connor. He's a proud Irishman and he's a good fella, and he didn't want to probably see them in the lurch. But he was nearly too nice for his own good, because I felt at that stage he should have said, look, I've done me 2 games. If you want me to be the manager, tell me. If you don't, tell me. But it should never have really got to that stage, I suppose, is the point that I'm making. And then totally, as I said, I never felt Lee Carsley, once he was being touted maybe as potential for the interim with England, because he was already on that pathway with England and in the system, if you like, over there. His credentials were very, very good over there, that I never felt we were going to get him. So then we get this totally left field appointment, which I felt, to be fair, some of the commentary around Heimir Hallgrimsson when he came in first was a little bit disrespectful, because, and as Killian said in the intro, because of our standing in international football currently at the moment, we have no reason to be looking down our nose at anybody. And I felt it was a little bit disrespectful. And my initial comments were, yes, it's left field, but let's give the man a chance, and he can be doing no worse than maybe where we're at the moment. Then when he came in, I thought, so far we've seen him obviously in the few games. I felt he let himself down a little bit. No, not let himself down, maybe that's the wrong phrase. But I felt the media duties in the first camp, I felt as though what he was trying to do in the fact that John O'Shea had the 4 games and that he was kind of leaving it up to John, if you like, a little bit. I kind of got where he was coming from, but at the same time, if you're a new manager coming in, you need to stamp your imprint all over the team and the squad from day one. And even with the media, come out and speak to them. And we were.
And with that, like, as a former player, because, like, you know, from the outside as a fan, you're kind of going, like you said, I get John taking it, maybe the first one, you know, he let him get his bearings, but, like, as a player in the dressing room, you kind of go, oh Jesus, we're worried now, like.
Yeah, well, not so much even worried, Connor. It was just a case of, I suppose, the players were probably in the same boat as us, the supporters, because he was so left field, and they were probably curious to hear and know what he was like. Yes, they were hearing him maybe on the training ground, but that was only maybe the initial 2 or 3 days, whereas in press conferences, you can hear questions being asked about what way you like to play, your philosophy, all these kind of phrases and things. And I just felt on those ones, he should have been out facing the media front and centre. He didn't, for whatever reasons. We heard the reasons afterwards, but I just felt your first campaign, set your stall out from day one, and he never did that. Then we moved on. That would have been the only criticism I would have had from him. Then when we moved into the second camp, I actually felt as though he took that criticism on board, and he was very much front and centre in the last couple of games that we had seen. And it was great to get the victory in Finland. Like, we've been crying out for a victory. We really have. And it was a great goal that Robbie Brady scored as well. I felt in the second game against Greece, we were well beaten. We were totally outplayed. Only for Kelleher, it would have been 4, 5, 6. It could have been. And there's loads to work on. He was under no illusions just how difficult the job was and is. And I'm sure he's even seeing that it's probably even more difficult than he ever imagined right now as well at the moment, because of our standing, as Killian said, and where we're ranked and stuff. But that's not to say there's potential there as well. And I like him, Connor. I have to say, he's very pragmatic. He's realistic. He says it as it is. He's not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. He knows it's a difficult job. He's telling us that. But I think so far, give the man a chance, and he's done okay.
I think we're all in that camp, to be honest. And I think our only, I'll be honest with you, we gave Robbie Brady a bit of shit for a while there, and when he put the ball in the back of the net, we had to eat our humble pie. But, you know, I think our one criticism was he was slightly safe in his initial team selections. I don't know if you were feeling the same.
Well, the way we described it was, if this is your experimenting, we'd hate to see what you're doing it in the bedroom.
Oh, like, Jesus Christ.
I think, again, going back to the comment just about, like, that he was leaving a lot up to John, I'd say that was probably coming from John with Robbie as well, because they have a relationship going right back to the Man United days. To be fair to Robbie, and Preston are going quite well at the moment. He is playing games regularly. And I think we've seen that in the Finland game. In the second half, he was absolutely brilliant. Now, I'm sure you're probably coming at the angle no more than any of us that, look, we've seen Robbie for a number of years. Now, maybe is there someone new coming along? But the left back position has been a problem for quite a while. And no one's really stepped up to the plate in terms of a younger player and grabbing that jersey, if you like, and making it his own to move forward. So that's why Robbie is still there. But one thing Robbie Brady has always had throughout his career, and he still does, and we've seen that in the game, is quality. And that's something that we're lacking, whether it's dead ball specialists, set pieces, deliveries from wide areas, whatever the case may be. He's always had that, Robbie. And I think we saw that in the game. But certainly going forward, I just feel as though that is an area where we're probably crying out for someone. And there's probably another couple of positions on the pitch, something similar. And now I think the right back position is something as well where it's probably up for grabs at the moment. We saw the comments from Matt Doherty. I'm sure he wasn't too pleased being left out of the squad, as he said himself. But I think the manager got that one right, because in the previous campaign, he didn't perform. And I think this manager, one thing that I think what we've seen, even though it's only a small sample size, is if you're not performing, you won't be playing. It's as simple as that. And I think that's always the best policy for a manager.
It's the best standard to set. And I think, you know, our grievances, be it Brady or any of the people that have been around for a long time, it's not the talent level that, or I think it's more that just we need to plan for the future. And, you know, with the future in mind, is there any of we've got a crop of young players coming through? Is there anyone who you're kind of championing?
Yeah, well, definitely in terms of the centre half positions, that's where we're kind of stocked. Now, I know he kind of trialled the Darragh Shea thing, a right back. I wouldn't like to see that in the long term, because I think Darragh Shea, unfortunately for us, we're stacked at centre half, because I think our best players are all centre halves. Darragh O'Shea, Nathan Collins, and I was watching Scales even last week in the Champions League, and he was outstanding. And I think that could be the makings of a really good partnership there with the likes of Collins and Scales. Or I would love to see O'Shea in there somewhere as well, because I really like Darragh O'Shea. So I think we're stacked in that area. Ebisele came on, but I think he's still very much hit and miss in terms of there's potential, all right. But I think what you get with a young player, and we've seen that even he's on loan now at Watford, and you can kind of see that he's a little bit up and down, and obviously provided that moment and a great cross for Brady. But what you're going to get out of him over a period of 8-10 games on a consistent basis, I'm not so sure. So I think definitely the wide fullback areas, there's places up for grabs, but who's going to take them, I don't know. Conor, and what I liked what he did, and unfortunately the bad news with Ogbene during the week, was I think him as a wing back, and what we've seen in the second half, he was absolutely outstanding. Is that a cat on the screen?
That is a cat, yeah.
And be like, where a cat is running across the screen and being rubbed and pickled and all sorts of. Killian, I love it.
The real secret of not a pundit.
yeah. There's an extra presenter in the mix there. Yeah.
Alan, a question I have for you, I suppose, and you sort of touched on it, is, like, I feel like we were sort of unlucky with the group that we got in terms of England and Greece. Is like Greece are a really good side. They just came off the back of beating England, and I think one thing I took out of that second Greece game was we sort of need to readjust where we think we're at to where we currently are. And I think that would be a big thing for fans and people that follow the team is then it gets a bit easier. Like, I think not supporting, but realizing what avenue you're in. And I'm just interested to see, like, from your perspective, how you think that, like, where you sort of think we are in terms of that.
Yeah, I agree totally, Nate. But I think the readjustment should have happened about a year and a half ago, because if fans and supporters can't see just how far we've fallen and just how far we're off the level of where we think we should be or where we would hope to be, I don't think it's any clearer than what we're seeing in the performances. We're a million miles off it. Now, you mentioned England and Greece, and that obviously was a difficult group. And if you're comparing us to England, yes, we're a million miles off it. If you're comparing us to Greece, we're a fair bit off them as well, as we've seen in both games. Finland is probably our level now, and we saw that in the game against them, and there wasn't probably much. And I do think we were probably the better team. It was probably the best performance we've put in a wee while, which was good to see. But certainly in terms of the expectation, and you look at the Nations League or the groups or the qualifiers, we're right down in like pot 4 or whatever. I don't think we're quite pot 5 yet, but we're certainly pot 4.
We're on the brink of it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be it's going to be a long road back.
An interesting thing that I sort of took out of Heimir in his second camp was he sort of started talking about being more pragmatic, and I think that's sort of parts that we lacked under Kenny is being pragmatic, and I've been a big fan of that, and I'd wanted us to switch to being more set up to beat teams, not beat teams, but become hard to beat. And I think that's one thing I took out of the second camp as a positive, is those sort of questions coming out of Heimir is like, we got to be hard to beat on the pitch, and that's the first step, and then you build on it.
Yeah, I agree totally, Nate, because as much as I champion Stephen Kenny, and look at the job he's doing now at Pats and all, and then people might say, oh, well, he's back at his level and he was never kind of an international manager. But to be fair to Stephen, I think Stephen got caught between a rock and a hard place, because he came in probably and timing is everything in football. And he come in and sometimes you just can't pick your jobs. They just fall at your feet, and sometimes you feel this is my time and I have to take it, but it might not be the best time. The likes of an example of David Moyes taking over from Alex Ferguson. He probably felt it was the best job in the world, and it was, but taking over from Alex Ferguson is near impossible. So it can be the wrong time as well in that regard. And I just feel with Stephen, because there was so much to do, and then it was almost a case of not only the turnover of players and trying to bring in new players and get them caps under their belt and get them game time at senior level as well. There was also this kind of almost kind of a debate that used to rage and break out after every match about the style of football and the culture and all that kind of stuff. And I always think the one thing with us, Nate, and the one thing that we've always had is that we've always been tough to beat, and they're our strengths, and you should never go away from our strengths. That doesn't mean to say you can't play football, but you could still be very, very hard to beat. And I think with Stephen, he almost went away from what he was always very good at. And if you look at his Dundalk team and his Pats team now, They were never this possession-based team that would bore you to tears and go over and back the pitch playing sideward passes. They were dynamic, direct, getting bodies in the box, 2 wingers always going down the line. And you see that with St. Pat's now. And I'd love to speak to Stephen, and I will one day. And the question I'm going to ask him is, did you really die on your sword? And I don't think he did, because going back to the 3 at the back and the wing backs, that was never Stephen. He always played a 4-3-3 or something like we see with Pats now, with obviously something similar with the 2 wide players and Keena up front and being direct and quick. Good progressive football, but none of this stuff over and back. And I just think we got bogged down so badly by that, Nate. And then there was almost, as I said, these debates were raging almost game by game, and we've gone away from all that. So to hear Heimir come back, and he's obviously noticed that, and then he's coming from a background of Iceland where they would have been very, very similar. Their starting point was tough to beat, don't concede goals, and if we can nick one on the break or a set piece, or eventually we'll progress forward in terms of trying to play a little bit more attacking football, but your starting point is that you don't concede. I think he's right in doing that, because I think that's what we have to get back to.
For me, it's something we've discussed in the pod a lot, and it's even mostly with Ireland, but in football teams in general. Like, for me, especially with Ireland, like, I don't care if we have a specific way we play football as long as we're competing in games. I don't care if it changes week to week in who we're playing, and as long as we're fighting. But I mean, is that difficult for players to be in that scene where they don't know what the system is? It's kind of like, just go out and beat them, lads. Like, that's probably not the easiest as a player to handle.
Yeah, and even saying that now, Connor, and I think if you were to speak to 90% of fans, they'd probably agree with that statement that you just said. But we were coming off the back of some of the worst football you'll ever see with Trapattoni, Mick McCarthy, horrendous stuff. And people were just so sick of it that they wanted to see us playing a bit more progressively. But now, because they've seen it's been so difficult and so hard for us to implement that, I think people are back to the view of, look, I don't care how we get results once we get results. Now, I've always maintained, even when I was championing, Stephen, there's still a balance, and there has to be a balance. It can't be all one way and all another way. It can't be total football or kind of dinosaur football. You can still play attacking football, but you can also still be very, very hard to beat. Like, look at Liverpool at the moment. Under Klopp, they used to cough up so many chances. They've only conceded 3 goals. Now, I know there are 2 goals at the weekend. They've only conceded 5 goals, yet they're still electric going forward. So it's just about your shape and your setup and how you're structured in and out of possession. And I think, to be fair, this manager is probably a little bit more along the sides of a bit more caution and then attack, rather than we're all out attack and wide open and we're getting caught left, right and centre. So I definitely think there's a balance.
I think for Kenny, one of the issues he encountered, and I think you were kind of touching on it there, is he fell into that kind of Pep Guardiola world of expectation of there's a system and there's a whole plan in place. But I think a large part of why it went sour so quickly was, this is personally speaking now, I think he was mismanaged from a communications point of view. I think his post-match interviews, I don't know if he was... I think that was the only part of me and him not being potentially ready for the world of international football was what came with it. From a football perspective, I think he had it. And I think he, as he said, what he's been able to do with Dundalk and Pats. And I think it's... I wouldn't want people looking at that, saying that's his level. But I think it was just a bad PR job for a lot of it,
Yeah, and of course, I suppose because there's so much scrutiny nowadays, Connor, the media side matters so much. There was a time years ago when you might only hear a manager speak once a week. Now they're out doing interviews 2, 3, 4 times a week. Every clip is cut up, social media, little snippets here, there and everywhere. You say the wrong thing, people are jumping all over it. So it's very, very difficult in that regard. And I think that's why you have to be almost really, really sharp and polished when it comes to the media stuff as well. Not so much just about your football end. I think you have to be good in that regard as well. And yeah, he probably did fall down in that area, but it's just sad for me because he cared so much. We all wanted him to succeed. And I definitely think he didn't die on a sword. He definitely didn't die on a sword. Changing the formation, the 3 at the back. I don't always have been influenced by others. Anthony Barry came in at the time, and he was very much from that mould, highly regarded coach, coming from Chelsea. That's the way they were playing. I don't know. I haven't never spoken to Stephen about it, but I will one day definitely and ask him that. But you look at, as I said, you look at the way his teams have always played, and I followed Dundalk for years. We were covering every match with Dundalk, and they were electric to watch. And now you watch Pats, and it's something similar. So I definitely believe that he never died on a sword.
I'm delighted for him that he's been able to get back to just enjoying football, or it seems like he is. I don't know him, but it seems like he's back to enjoying it.
One of the things that Kenny could never have been criticised for, though, was blooding through talent. Like, he did bring through a good few players that have now become like starting 11 players for Ireland. One of the things that excited me when Heimir was announced was he's quite good at that as well, but he's also very good for doing the granny rule, which I think it was like 7 players in a short time at Jamaica coming through. Now, myself and the lads have disagreed on this on more than one occasion. I want to see that used to its fullest, but obviously you've been in dressing rooms where there's different nationalities kind of coming together. Like, you've been one of the guys coming in from Ireland, going over to the UK. Is it something that you think could work, or do you think it's potentially not worth the risk for a manager that's already facing a fair amount of scrutiny that he hadn't been quite used to?
Oh no, I think Killian, he has to avail of everything that's kind of on offer to him in terms of if a player strengthens the squad. And if that means it's through the granny rule or whatever, and he feels as though it'll be a player that will enhance the squad and help him and potentially be a starter and help us and wants to play, that's the most important thing from these lads, that they're here for the right reasons and they want to play. Well, then, absolutely, that's what the rule is there for, and you can only work by the rules. So I'd have no issue with that. The only issue I would have is that you're bringing a lad in for the sake of bringing him in, and he doesn't really want to be here. Well, then what's the point? I'd much rather see a young Irish lad play than giving someone an opportunity that doesn't really want to be here. The reason he probably brought so many in at Jamaica is because they were probably a limited squad, a lot more limited than us. So I don't really see him being in a position where he has to bring in that amount. But as I say, if there's one or two that can help us, I think we're in that situation, Killian, where I don't think we can turn our nose up at any situation that's going to help us, as I say. So if that's the case and that's what he's going to do, I'm sure he's looking at things like that. He has to be.
What's success for you with this Ireland team? Or I suppose look, we're not going to win any tournaments. We're lucky if we're even in qualifying contention. But what's this like? Is it a style of play you're looking for? Is it a system? Is it just winning games, or what is it?
One thing he spoke about as well, Connor, to go back to what Nate was saying about us being tough to beat, and another thing he said in a couple of the camps so far that I've really liked is continuity in team selection and getting lads that he's maybe only using 14, 15, 16, whatever, like barring injuries. But again, with Stephen, there was such a turnover and you were chopping and changing, and you have to build relationships in teams. And you look at all the best teams, they know they're 8 or 9 or 10 or starters, and you might change the odd one here and there or through a suspension, through an injury, but the nucleus of the team remains the same always. And you look at all the successful teams, that's what you'll get. And he spoke about that, and he wants to get to a situation where the lads coming in know that there's at least 8 or 9. There's the 2 centre halves, there's the 2 centre midfielders, a wide man. The left winger suspended, so I might have to bring one in, but at least I know the 9 that are going to play on this side of the pitch, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's important to get to that stage as well, and I think that's what he's working towards, which I think is a positive if he can get that. Success, really, I suppose we're at such a low ebb, Connor. The only thing you just want to see is get back to some sort of competitiveness, that we're in a group or we're in the fight, and I think it's going to be baby steps. Like, this isn't Heimir Hallgrimsson's fault, or it's not Stephen Kenny's fault. This is a legacy issue of the lack of investment and the lack of interest towards Irish football for a number of years. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. And this is why we're seeing us struggle so badly. So if anyone thinks this is Heimir's fault or Stephen Kenny's, they're so mistaken. As I said, this is the lack of real kind of care and attention that should have been there over a number of years towards Irish football that hasn't been there, and now we're seeing the results of that. So it's going to take us a long time to get back to where we are. And even you started about, I suppose, League of Ireland thriving at the moment and crowds up and the increase in crowds and all. It is, absolutely, but the facilities are still as bad as they've ever been. And that's been a major problem as well. There's been no work done on facilities over the years. So Irish football has been neglected for such a lengthy period of time that not only is it an issue at senior football, domestic football as well. And hopefully we're on the road to seeing it come back. There was an announcement made today with Mark Scanlon just about, I suppose, what the league offers to the economy as well, and the money it brings in, which is only a good thing. And we need to be telling that story to government and government officials so that they'll rein in behind it, and we can see the investment going into the facilities that we need from a government point of view. But that's why we're in the situation we're in. Not because Heimir's come in and he was a left field appointment, or Stephen might have struggled for 2 years. It's because of the shambles that Irish football has been for such a long period of time, in terms of all the legacy issues and the neglect that was there with the previous regime.
And do you think that's kind of across every club in the league? You know, obviously there's teams that are better and worse in the League of Ireland, but I mean, I outside one or two, it seems to me like those facilities are the same across all levels of teams in the league.
Yeah, because as I say, they were getting no help. The clubs were firefighting on a regular basis, year in, year out, between wages, salaries, trying to get a few pounds together to come up with a stand or whatever. Now, the Shamrock Rovers model, you might say, is very good because the council got them to ground, and that's where we need to be kind of touting towards stuff like that. The Daily Mount redevelopment is great news, but we need to see more of it. And I think we would have seen more of it if Irish football was in a much better position 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the last 10 years, whatever the case may be. Finally, I can see stuff that's going on now that I've been banging a drum about for 10 years, that I think we are eventually looking towards getting structures and stuff in place that we can start to move forward. But because it's been over such a lengthy period of time, we have fallen so far behind all the other progressive nations that have been doing this domestically. And that's why we find ourselves in a position where it's going to take a little bit longer maybe. But for the first time ever since I've been involved in Irish football, I can see things happening and discussions taking place with people that I can eventually, or can finally see there'll be results out of this, and real positive progressive results.
Alan, I'm interested to get your point of view, because I've sort of floated it to the lads in the past, is with the Ireland team, it's some positions we're really strong at and some we're not. And I go back to, say, recruitment in the League of Ireland and bringing through players. Is there a way to target positions and bring more, like put more emphasis on developing young talent in a certain position? Like, because I always hark back to, say, rugby, and not to get into that, is the IRFU will go to the 4 clubs and go, you're not signing another a player from outside Ireland in that position until we're happy with what's coming through. It's like, do you think that's a possible way to go into bringing through more talent in positions that we need?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Nate. And from what I know of the rugby, the IRFU control the four provinces
with an iron fist.
Yeah, and their sole kind of, as you say, focus is to get lads through to make Ireland a better team.
And the school system too, you know.
So it's not like for like in terms of the clubs here, and it's so fragmented, our structure, rightly or wrongly, but certainly in terms of, it'd be very hard for Heimir to go to a club and say, all right, make us a number 10 or make us a number 6, or so it doesn't really work like that.
Do you think it could be incentivized through funding or maybe stuff like that, you know, like quotas and stuff? Like I'm just floating the idea of how do we get them next players in?
Yeah, I think it just comes back to the standard of coaching that we have as well, to be honest with you, Nate. And for years and years, again, go back to the lack of investment. We've had volunteers coaching, and we still have volunteers coaching in certain positions. So they're not specialised coaches, if you like. Now there is clubs trying their best, and now with academy coaches at a higher level and getting their licenses, coaching badges, all that kind of thing will help to develop young players and to coach them in a better way, if you like. But we've been so reliant on all our best players going to 15, and the English clubs, with all the professionalism that they have in terms of coaching and resources and facilities and all that, finishing off the development of a lad from 15 to 18, and then he plays in the first team, and then he plays in the senior team for Ireland at 20, and we're thinking this fella's amazing. But he's after getting 5 years of elite level coaching and training, whereas because of Brexit, this has been stumbled on our doorstep, and all of a sudden we're trying to fumble around and think, all right, put this in place, put that in place. And again, going back to the conversations about government funding and money going into clubs that eventually we can kind of ring fence towards, just purely for paying for coaches, if you like, to give the players, because the onus is on us, now, and responsibility is on us to develop the players, which has never been there. And if we can get to a stage where we do have, and there is great coaches, I've no doubt about it, but if they're getting the support and investment behind them to make them even better, we will develop brilliant players, if you like. But it's all this is a result of all the shit that has gone on, excuse my French, but that's the reality of it.
And if you're one of those top prospects, like as you were when you were a young lad, would you be like take out even the Brexit rule? Would you be looking at the UK still going, yeah, that's where I need to be to have my career, or would you go like as it's great to hear you're saying that you're starting to see signs in the League of Ireland that's coming through, but if you had to do it all again, would you be thinking try stick it out at home for another year or two, or do you think it's if you're at that level, are you just focused solely on the UK?
Yeah, it's a good question, Connor, and I've been torn on this over the years because when I went away, and for everyone that went away at the same time as me or in around that time, England was the be all and end all, and that was it because there was nothing here in terms of an opportunity. But now, because not just with Brexit, but because the clubs now are in a position where there is academy teams, underage teams playing in a national league against the best players, and you can see a pathway through those age groups that you see the likes of a Mason Melia playing in the first team or any of the young lads progressing through, and they can see I could play in St. Pat's at 18, 19, 16, 17, whatever, if they're good enough, that all of a sudden you feel as though you're a player, and there's a real opportunity for you to make your way in the game here, if you like. Now, when those lads, the exceptional ones will always go away anyway, Connor, and I've no problem with that. And you will see Mason Mealy go away, or all these lads. But now I see lads starting out at 14, 15, wanting to play with Bohemians and wanting to play with St. Pat's or Shelburne, and not feeling like, oh, it's just England and that's it, or Europe. Whereas they actually feel as though I could have a career here. And if we can get the, I suppose, rowing behind the investment side of things, that if we can get the facilities in place and the structures in place, and that famous word that everybody uses, if we can make an industry here, those lads will make a career for themselves here that they'll never even have to go away. Now, they might not make the money that they can live on forever, but they'll certainly make a full-time career for 10, 12 years for themselves and hopefully earn good money. And that's the aim. That's where we're looking to get the league to. And that's not just with young players. Coaches want to be doing their coaching badges as well, with the view that I could manage shells, or I could be a coach, I could be assistant manager, I could be a full-time coach in the League of Ireland. There's very, very few roles and jobs for all those lads, and there's hundreds of lads I know doing coaching roles and coaching badges, but there's so very little opportunities for them. And that's why everybody goes on with this industry word, and that's where we need to get to, both from a playing point of view and also maybe from a coaching point of view.
Like what you're saying about building an industry, like one of the conversations that we've had before kind of on that, and it's kind of along the lines of what Nate was saying, was with the conversations happening now of a potential third division in the League of Ireland, do you think we should be looking at a development team for the Irish structure within the league structure? So this was like a model that was done out in the Philippines. So they had the ASCA's development team. The whole point of that was basically for players that were trying to break through into the youth teams of the national teams, the under-21s and all that, so that they can kind of get used to playing with each other, and or players that were maybe not quite good enough to go abroad, but were too good for the teams that were in the league, or the league couldn't afford them, and that they couldn't take the risk on them, and they wanted to get them that extra bit of time. Do you think that there is space for the FAI to kind of have a team like that, where them players that may lose out by just being not getting a move at the right time or anything like that, that they're kind of given time to bed in, and maybe kind of have like what Man United are doing now with like the Paul McShane role of kind of like having these young players playing along these seasoned players and playing men's football, rather than just getting stuck in that perpetual youth game?
Well, the third division thing I wouldn't be a fan of anyway, to be honest. Like, we need to sort out the first division here. Never mind bringing another third division. Like, the first division, I feel sorry for the teams. Like, teams with huge history, and it's like a graveyard for those teams with no real incentives for them to get better or to improve, or what's the plan really for them. Whereas I see huge development in the Premier Division with them all full-time bar Drogheda, and that might change soon with them as well with their investment. But I'm not sure about a development team, to be honest with you, Killian. Would you put them in the third division? Is that what you're saying?
Was if with if they're talking about expanding, well, then there's going to be space for extra teams. Like ideally, I think a first division, like kind of in the realms of like what UCD were initially, that kind of.
But just a centralized team, kind of controlled by
yeah. So that like be it the under 21s coach for Ireland would be having an influence on them, and kind of. It would kind of potentially give a more of a full-time role to what would be currently a part-time.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have thought the lads that could be kind of players for that team are probably already involved, because if they're like, if you're talking about a development squad, I think they'd be good enough to be playing in a first division or a Premier Division team anyway. So you're probably looking at them on a regular basis. And I don't want to see, I know people were saying around the time, I think Stephen Bradley was critical of it as well, that Heimir was saying about bringing in a team, around January, or I wouldn't agree with that. I think lads are there, like, again, going back to, we're 64th in the world or whatever. So no way should an international team be looking down their nose at a Graham Burke or a Jack Byrne or a Danny Mandrio or a Mason Mealy in our league whatsoever. Some of those lads would be good enough to play in the national team. So I wouldn't be going along with that. Now, I think I don't know, was Heimir in agreement with that or whatever? I can't remember. I just know Stephen Bradley was critical of it, and I would agree with Stephen on that. These lads are playing here. I don't think there's anyone right now at this moment that would play in the national team, but I definitely think there's one or two around that could potentially force their way into the squad maybe. I definitely think that, and there's a lot of young players in the league at the moment, and you look at even the likes of Gav Malloy, who's just gone away playing with Aberdeen now. He's an outstanding player. He'll be in the senior team soon enough as well. I think he's absolutely brilliant, and he's been the best young player in this league for the last 18 months, 2 years. So I definitely think there's players in the league either with the potential, or if they get themselves back to a level or a standard, that could be in the next squad.
Yeah, it's one of them kind of. I think where Heimir was coming from with that kind of idea is something that the Scandinavians do, where it's a version of the B team, of like what England used to do with like the B or the C teams, and just kind of giving lads, not to sound terrible, but like pat on the head caps. So like it was something that I thought is a good thing, because I think it's again one of them kind of giving a little bit of hope to the league, but maybe it's condescending for me to say that.
Yeah, it is. I think it is, Killian. Not you. I mean, I think that's how it would be viewed.
Yeah.
If that was in place. Because we've spent the last 20 minutes talking about investment and building an industry and infrastructure and all those things. Yet then in the second part of that, we're saying, but bring the lads up to the camp for a day out, and for let Heimir coach them for a day or whatever.
Yeah. Cereal box prize kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, we need to view the league as a serious commodity that people could say, see him there, he could play at a higher level, or he could play in the international team or whatever. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think there's, right now at this moment in time, there's one I'd pick to go in, but I definitely think there's a couple of lads playing in the league that you would say eventually, or if he keeps going the way he's going, or he has the potential to be maybe involved in a squad. Like what we saw with Jack Byrne. When Jack was involved with Mick McCarthy's squads, he didn't look out of place. He was actually better than half of them that were in the squad at the time. Unfortunately, Jack has been curtailed now with injuries, and he's slowly but surely coming back to himself. But because he's been so kind of struck down, and the move didn't help him that time, he went to Cyprus either, and he kind of dropped down the pecking order then again. But certainly talent-wise, he'd be as good as most. Like even Nate was talking there about specialised positions, and midfield, I think, is our biggest problem in the international team. Jack would be technically as good as anything we have in the centre midfield.
It was interesting that we mentioned the report earlier that came out today about the 100-odd million that gets invested into the Irish economy from the League of Ireland. And it got me thinking personally about, imagine for 5 years we went, okay, we take that money and it goes back into the league, where that league would be in 5 years. Like, I don't see, like, I saw it a bit of as a shame when that came out today, in terms of like, if that money got reinvested, like Irish football would be tenfold, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with that, Nate, how I would view that is sending that message and creating that report and putting it out there now for people to see. Again, we're talking about news outlets and social media, and everybody can see it. That's what all the other organisations do for their sport. And we've been so slow in doing that. again, because of maybe the regime that was there before, because of maybe not forward thinking lads who are in the FEI now, maybe that are looking at stuff like that, saying we need to get this message out there. We need to get a report done up to tell everybody just what we are and how good we could be, and look at the potential that we have. Because that's when reports are published like that, that's when all of a sudden politicians or government people sit up and take note. And that's when you have a stronger case that if you're banging on the door of a politician to go and look for funding, and we're looking for huge funding, that you can carry a really strong case with you, and you're able to plant it on the table in black and white and say, this is what we do, look what we have, and help us. And I think that's
where, like in the film industry, that was the thing that made the difference. Like when the Irish Film Board was re-established in 1990 after the Oscar winning of The Crying Game by Michael D. Higgins, it was, let's start it off with tax because it's not out of pocket money. And then 6 years later, they were like, oh, this is actually bringing in 7 to 8 times what it was, the outlay technically was. And I think we all can see now, 30 years on, the health of the Irish film industry. So money talks ultimately for all the big guys, and hopefully this will be the start of them starting to realize the value financially, but then there's the uncalculable intrinsic value of having your own league and your own sport and your own kind of national pride and identity in that.
Yeah, 100%, Killian, and that's how I would view it, because as I say, it's getting the message out there, something that we haven't done before, and it makes us look professional and credible. And again, that's something that the FEI have been shot down for, and rightly so, on so many occasions before, because it has never looked like that. Whereas when you're publishing reports and working in detailed reports, and you have it in black and white, and there's real substance behind the report, that people can say, okay, fair enough, this is a serious proposition here we have in front of us. Yes, we will invest in it. That's the only way you're going to get investment, rather than just banging on the door saying, for us, help us. It doesn't work like that. And that's why maybe we've been caught behind the 8 ball with other organisations that have been better at doing that. And now, again, going back to my point about finally seeing some kind of green shoots where this stuff is happening, and I can see results coming from this stuff. It's great to see, and I'm all for it.
One final one from me, just, in that report, we should say it's a BDO Ireland report, of kind of available everywhere, but one of the main stats for me from the men's game anyway was the increase in attendance of, it was 19 or 20%. And do you think that's down to the quality of players that are now in the league, or the likes of Damien Duff being back in the league, or what do you think or is it just having an it moment?
I think it's probably a result of all those, if you like, Conor. I don't think there's one thing. I think off the back of COVID as well, people wanted to get out and see live football again. That helped us in a strange way. Then I suppose there's so much money available now in English football as well, and I think people have become a little bit disillusioned with English football as well, that all of a sudden when people were banging the drum about go out and support your own domestic league, finally people maybe took it on board and thought, yeah, I'll give it a shot, and like what they see. And there's a huge influx of kids being brought to games as well. I think that's a result of the amount of academy teams now that League of Ireland clubs have, that all of a sudden there's a focus on bring your kid down as well. He plays with the under-14s, the family or whoever's bringing the kid down to see them play. All these things help. That absolutely Damien Duff and the profile that he has, an iconic figure in Irish football, to have him at the helm in one of the biggest clubs, 100%. The interest in the league at the moment and the brilliant finish that we have, all these things matter and help. My only gripe with all that is that, yes, we've great attendances, and yes, they're up massively, and long may continue. But if we don't improve facilities for these people, they'll soon turn around and say, here, I'm not putting up with this shitty toilet situations or the bar areas, or you want, like, even the rugby example, you can go and feel like it's a night out and go with a bit of comfort maybe and have a beer, whatever, a bite to eat. I think we need to get to that level as well. But certainly in terms of the attendance has been up, it's positive and brilliant.
I couldn't say it better myself.
Alan, you have a match to watch. We really appreciate the time. Thank you very much. And obviously, thanks as ever to Nate and Connor and you, the listener. We'll chat to you next week.
Killian, the only thing I'm disappointed about is the fact that it's taken you so long to bring a pundit on the Not a Pundit podcast. But now I'm going to be a resident pundit every time that you need a pundit, okay?
100%. Anytime.
Okay.
We'll be the Nota, you be the pundit. Thanks a million.
Pleasure. Thanks. Good to see you all, lads.
Messi. Messi. Oh my goodness. Balotelli.